What I saw at the anti-lockdown protest was a variety of different types of people who were interested in raising their voices in opposing the current lockdown restrictions. And they opposed these restrictions for a variety of reasons. Some of them were conspiracy theory-oriented reasons, such as concerns about 5G and concerns about vaccines. And some people also just had concerns about the way the Scottish government and the UK government was using its authority, and that it was a violation of fundamental freedoms. Well, it's tough to tell how much conspiracy theories have played a role in shifting politics to the right, and how much conspiracy theories are a consequence of shifting politics to the right. Mm-hmm. And it's also not just a shift to the right, but also a polarization of opinion in places like the United Kingdom and the United States, so that the middle of the political spectrum has faded away as people have moved more to the extremes. And that's tended to create more information bubbles for people, so that people are less likely to have contact with people who are in the middle or people who disagree with them. And then those kind of information bubbles do tend to feed conspiracy theories. So I would say it's both. It's both that conspiracy theories push politics to the right, but then politics polarizing also creates conspiracy theories as well.
Okay.
Well, people believe in conspiracy theories for a variety of reasons. There has actually been a fair amount of political science research on this topic. One particular article that I consulted on this is by Joanne Miller, Kyle Saunders, and Christina Farhart. And what they point out is that the people who are knowledgeable about politics but lacking in trust tend to be people that are more vulnerable to conspiracy theories. And also, people use conspiracy theories to solve their ideological and psychological needs. So people who are particularly frustrated by things that are happening in their lives or things that are happening in the world may turn to conspiracy theories as a way to sort of deal with the anxiety that they are having that is associated with those events and problems. You're looking at a very complex situation with the COVID-19 pandemic right now. And the governments in the United Kingdom and in Scotland and in other places have taken certain measures to try to deal with this problem. But those measures also have their cost. So I think that people recognize and see those costs, and some people have become increasingly frustrated and upset with those costs. So, for example, I'm very grateful that I work for the University of Glasgow, and I am able to work at home. Mm-hmm. And so even though there's a pandemic, I'm still getting a paycheck every month, and I'm extremely grateful for that. A lot of people have lost their paychecks. A lot of people are suffering, not from sickness, but from economic deprivation. And they are looking for a way to try to voice their frustration. So I would say this is a fundamental aspect of a free society, that people are able to raise their voices in these kind of situations and say, we don't like what's happening, we'd like something to be done differently. One of the things we know about people who believe in conspiracy theories is that they tend to be very distrustful of elite institutions. Mm-hmm. And I guess this isn't just true of conspiracy theorists, but it's also true of populists. And there's been a strong move toward populism in recent years. And that's populism, for example, has been a driving force behind the election of people like Boris Johnson and Donald Trump. And so these people are very distrustful of different kinds of elites, government elites, media elites, business elites. Well, there's a lot of information out on the internet, people look to that information, and when they find it in particular sources, and it helps to solve some of the problems that they see in the world or helps them to cope with certain anxieties that they have, they turn to those sources of information, even though those sources of information haven't necessarily been vetted by experts. So a person who is able to kind of produce a coherent story and publishes it online, that person can help to feed a conspiracy theory. Well, yes, I mean, I'm an educator. So I think that the more that people are well educated and the more that people have the analytical tools that they need to be able to look at information and make competent judgments about the veracity of that information. And one of the things that we've observed in recent years as the sheer amount of information has expanded and people have had increasing access to that information, they have not at the same time had an increasing ability to evaluate that information. And so that is, I think, a general social problem. So the internet is a wonderful thing. The way that the internet connects us, the way that the internet provides so much information are extremely important and valuable things. Those are positive features of the internet. But one of the negative features of the internet is it spreads misinformation as well. So yes, that is definitely a dangerous cost that is associated with the internet, which otherwise has many benefits. People use conspiracy theories as a way of coping with the anxieties that they have in their lives. They use conspiracy theories as a way of answering the question, why are things going wrong for me? Right? So conspiracy theories are a coping mechanism. And I think that we're all, I think if you observed, you did observe people at the event last week showing definite signs of mental health problems. And I think that, many of us, if not all of us, are experiencing mental health problems associated with the lockdown. And I think it's understandable that under these circumstances that when people are very cooped up, that it has negative consequences. And so some of what you observed was those negative consequences. Obviously, freedom of speech is incredibly important. And it's very difficult to govern a society effectively if you don't have freedom of speech. I think that it's also valuable to have authoritative expertise that helps to make sense of the information that we come across. And one of the things that has happened with the internet as more and more information has become available is that information hasn't been balanced by authoritative expertise. And so there's a need for that. There's a value of that. But not only has authoritative expertise become scarcer, but it's also become less valued. And that's part of what's happened with populism is people being much less trustful of any kind of authority. So just to give an example, people are not trustful of their doctors anymore. They want to do an internet search about the diseases that they have. And so all kinds of authority are being questioned more than they once were in this world where information is so much more easily available. In the 1970s and 80s, there were a smaller number of media sources. So, for example, there were a limited number of television stations. In the United States, where I was living at the time, there were 4 major television stations. So any kind of information that you got from the news at these stations was very heavily vetted. So you might say that process of vetting screened out a lot of problematic information You might have also say it also screened out some important information as well. But the variety of information that people had access to was much smaller than it is today. This really began to change in 1990 with the rise of cable television. And of course, since the 2000s, the internet has been a source of much more variety of information. And you don't have the same opportunities for authoritative experts to screen that information as they once did. Well, I think that one of the strategies which has been employed by the Scottish National Party, the SNP, has been to demonstrate competence in government. And that the more that they have opportunities to demonstrate competence in government, the more that people will have confidence in an independent Scotland. And I think that that has definitely been true during the coronavirus crisis. Nicola Sturgeon, as the First Minister, and the SNP have really emphasized taking a professional approach to the crisis. They've kept people in the loop. They've explained their decisions and the reasons for their decisions. And I think that the government in Scotland in general has gotten very high marks from people. And in a very general way, I think that that helps to bolster their case for independence. At the same time, it will be very difficult to have any concrete movement toward independence while Boris Johnson is still the Prime Minister, because he's made it clear that he won't give the permission necessary to hold a referendum. What we've observed in Glasgow as a result of people demonstrating against COVID restrictions is happening not only in Glasgow, not only in Scotland, not only in the United Kingdom, but in many places in the world. And that this kind of demonstration is a very likely outcome of people speaking their minds in a free society. So there's major public policies that have been altered as a result of this crisis, and people feel a need to have a voice in this, and that's part of why we've had these protests.